Hey folks, Carolyn here to tell you just a little bit about the Games and Online Harassment Hotline. It's a free text message-based, confidential emotional support hotline that was created specifically for the gaming community. So whether you're a player, a developer, a streamer, a competitor, any part of the gaming community, the hotline is here for you, ready to provide emotional support or help finding the referrals and resources that you may need. Visit gameshotline.org for more information.
This kind of like Reddit drawing of a gross dude, we're all equipped to identify that person as a, evildoer, as someone who's, willing to do bad things. But again, it's those people like, Adam Brody or, Ryan Cooper, who really sort of allow us to sit with like the horror of this film.
Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Carolyn Pettit, and I'm joined by my coworker at Make Me Coffee, Ebony Adams. Hey, Ebony.
What's up?
Hey. And this week, we've got a special guest, writer and co-host of The Blaze with Lizzie and Kat Spada. Welcome, Kat. Thanks so much for being here today.
Hello. I am a fanalo of Feminist Frequency Radio, so I'm excited to be here.
Well, we'll see.
Even though I'm constantly like, Kat, don't listen to last week's episode. I wasn't very good on it. She's like, oh, no, it's just good. It sounds like you're in the room with me. And I'm like, that's even more reason not to listen. But anyway, she agreed to come on the show.
That's fantastic. And Anita is still on vacation somewhere. She did succeed in last week's mission of going back in time in a shipping container to recruit me to Feminist Frequency, if anyone was wondering how that went. Tenet reference. So it's up to the three of us to discuss Emerald Fennell's Blackly comic revenge thriller, Promising Young Woman. Stay tuned. Hey, folks. Yeah. So how's it going?
It's going well for me. As I intimated in the intro, I'm very excited to have my friend, co-worker, crafting buddy, heist partner, Kat Spada on with us today. Kat, tell us a little bit about yourself, please, so that other people know how awesome you are. Again,
sure.
No pressure.
Well, according to a team building exercise that we did recently do at our place of employ, Ebony and I run a feminist farm together. Farm co-op. This was basically what we spent our entire team building doing, which was LARPing our own fan fiction about ourselves.
Nice.
Yeah, I write. I do co-host the podcast, The Blaze with Lizzie and Kat, which has been on a bit of a pandemic hiatus, but we go through every episode of the original Beverly Hills 90210. So if you like the 90s, I always recommend spending some time with us as we go through that. And yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to describe myself when I feel like we've spent the last year in a sort of stasis, I guess, Sure. But I'm a writer. I spend a lot of time on the internet. So, I'm very hashtag not like other girls in that way. And when I agreed to be on the podcast, I did wonder how much I could spend talking about my crush on Emerald Fennell because I've loved her since she showed up on Call the Midwife, a PBS, BBC, I don't know, weeper. It's like, I guess, sort of weepy, but yeah. I'm just happy to be here and talk about this movie and
yeah. I did not know Emerald Fennell until she took over as showrunner for Killing Eve, which is something we might bring up in the context of our discussion of Promising Young Woman. But she wasn't someone who was on my radar. I think I had stopped watching Call the Midwife by the time, like, I would have known who she was. I was happy to just, sink into that story of, 50s and 60s midwives delivering babies and being paid in potatoes. But yeah, this film, in addition to Killing Eve, has now sort of, opened up an Emerald Fennell box in my pop culture brain. I'm like, let me go check out what else she's done.
Yes. spoiler alert, she doesn't show up until about season 4 of Call the Midwife and is a statuesque redhead with sapphic storylines. So if that makes you want to tune back in.
I might end this podcast early and go tune in.
Well, yeah, so that seems like a good opportunity for us to get into our main topic of du jour, Promising Young Woman. But before we truly dig in, I do want to offer a content warning for sexual assault and violence, given the subject matter of the film and the fact that we'll be discussing that subject matter in detail. I also want to offer a spoiler warning. Of course, there's kind of a standing spoiler warning for FFR in general. We pretty much always discuss in detail the plots and endings of everything we talk about. But Promising Young Woman in particular has an ending that, could be called, a twist or unexpected. And so we do recommend that you watch the film before listening to this episode, if you care at all about not having that revealed for you. So there is something deeply satisfying, albeit unsettling, about revenge stories. But it's crucial that the audience remain convinced of the inherent righteousness of the avenging agent. And as body counts or violence mounts, that can be a tricky needle to thread. Promising Young Woman is a fascinating entry into the revenge thriller genre, not least because it dances along a tightrope of expectations. Directed by actor and producer Emerald Fennell, the film is alternatively austere and explosively colored, desperately sad, and by turns bleakly funny. It's the story of Cassandra Thomas, who upends her life to punish the, so-called nice guys who make life a living hell for women, and in particular, the men who raped her best friend years ago and got away with it. Now, reviews have made a lot of that so-called twist ending, but focusing, just on the final 20 minutes of the film alone misses quite a lot of what makes the film so provocative. So, let's start elsewhere before making our way to that final 20 minutes.
Yeah. So just to kick things off, I just watched Promising Woman last night as of the recording of this episode on Monday, the 25th. Excuse me. And for the past several weeks, I think the film was released on streaming services on Christmas, which is an interesting thing to probably have watched on Christmas Day with the fam. But for the past several weeks, I've been watching people on Twitter and elsewhere online talk about the film, and almost to a person, the people I follow, this is by no means, me saying that this was the only reaction that audiences had, but the people I followed were all saying like, whoa, I watched this film and it kind of fucked with me. And I'm not quite sure what I think yet, but I really, really need to talk about it with people. Mm-hmm. I just saw several people having that exact same response. In fact, Anita, who is on vacation somewhere in the midst of time, also, posted something to that effect. And so I went in with the expectation that I too might have that kind of response. And I didn't. And I wonder if it's because I was kind of set up for that. And also because I'm not someone who ever shies away from spoilers. In fact, I often seek them out because I'm interested in how films or TV shows or books or whatever sort of lead us to the spoilers. But the actual surprise element of it is never something that I particularly care about or I feel will ruin a text. So I do wonder if I had not gone in prepared, knowing that at the end, again, Carol gave y'all a spoiler alert. So if you didn't turn off, do it now. I'm giving you 2 seconds. If you didn't know going in that Cass dies, before the end, this is not like, the penultimate shot. This is not like Cass dies and then fades to black. There's still, significant and important action after that fact. I do wonder if my reaction to the film would have been different.
Did you go in knowing that was the outcome?
I did.
Okay.
I did. And so I was prepared for it. And again, I was watching to see, how does a film that kills its protagonist in such a violent way, knowing that, that it's throughout, it has to set her up as sympathetic, and worthy of our empathy for the film to work. You know, how does it then manage to kill her off before the end and still have us remain invested in sort of like the emotional stakes of the film and not feel cheated? I personally did not feel cheated, but I do think some viewers were. So yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess let me take it back and maybe we can talk about, some of the scaffolding maybe that gets us to that point, because I mean, I think the film does the work of laying down things that do make us feel very invested in Cassie's quest, as it were. I mean, for one thing, I think this film is so like precise and accurate in a way that so many women will just nod knowingly along with and be like, yes, that's it exactly. This film gets it. Cataloging like the attitudes and the worldview, the mindset of so many men out there who like actually do see themselves as fundamentally decent, but who don't like actually see women as full human beings. And like there, there's one of the men who Cassie goes home with early on. Like he says something. This is just like one example of many that I think is emblematic of what the film does in this regard. He says, things like, "Why do you wear makeup?" And it's just this soul-sucking system meant to oppress women, and it's fucked up. And it's like, he's sort of not wrong in the letter of what he's saying about like the patriarchal like framework that kind of says that women, but he doesn't like understand the double bind that women are in and how he himself is like part of that double bind. Like if Cassie didn't wear makeup, if she, how society like expects women to look a certain way, that if she didn't meet those expectations, like he probably wouldn't have looked twice at her. Like, I mean, so it's just fascinating. And again, like I think so accurate in like sort of almost cataloging throughout the film so many of those kinds of precise kinds of things. You know what I mean?
I think that the look and feel of the movie is really important too. I read an interview with the costume designer whose name, of course, escapes me, but she did The Virgin Suicides and Lost in Translation. She did Nirvana music videos, like
interesting.
And she talked about how the really cheery, floral, bright, feminine colors that Cassandra wears are kind of her way of preventing people from asking how she's doing. And that it's like this armor of like, you don't ask the person in the brightly colored pink cardigan, hey, you seem a little bit down today. But what was interesting to me is that the whole, like all the production design, the sets, the backdrops were the same kind of rococo bubblegum world that we were kind of living in. And it's like, oh yeah, we're in this world where bad things happen and sometimes good people are doing those bad things. So I think that that's pastel landscape kind of set that on its head a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I was struck by the use of color and the sort of different palettes, excuse me, that were on offer in different environments or in different contexts. So yeah, you have like the pastels on Cassandra's nails and that amazing wig she wears, in the final sort of set piece at the bachelor party at the cabin. But then also the coffee shop and just like this really sort of like, what's that board game, like Candyland, sort of environment. But then the way that those colors are incredibly muted, still pastel, but muted in her family home. And how the photography, the cinematography in this film is just amazing because there are scenes with Carey Mulligan, whether she's backlit, excuse me, or lit from the front, but she's in these almost like Stepford House kind of framings, with that really like ornate furniture, but it looks as if it could be something from the 60s, and this simmering rage that she carries with her, but that's displaced onto this like aesthetic vintage look.
But that's kind of a theme. I mean, I think about Lolita and like how, and obviously it's a slightly different issue in Lolita, but that everything is just light and bubblegum. Or even this movie made me want to rewatch An Education, the first Carey Mulligan kind of breakout role, and how gorgeous looking I remember that movie being when you're watching something sinister happen the whole time.
Yeah, and that the costumes and the look of Cassie's world, the home, decor, as you mentioned, and all of that, like I think it really speaks to how Cassie's life, to what she's lost as a person in terms of her, maybe not because of the trauma that she has suffered, like the ability or the hope of real like romantic connection and all of that. I mean, there's a moment. I think Carey Mulligan does a fantastic job of conveying Cassie's like sort of resentment and anger at the world and what it's cost her. There's like a scene where after I think something happens where it's very clear that something happens with the Bo Burnham character, who we also have to talk about, but where she like kicks over a trash can and like she's clearly like, because she is afraid of, understandably, like she's afraid of intimacy and afraid of like trusting a person and going down that road. And I don't know, you just get this feeling of her life being like derailed in a sense by from like the expectations that a person might have for the arc that their life is going to have by the trauma that she's suffered and experienced. Or, I mean, it is important to note that it was not Cassie herself, but her friend Nina, who was actually raped and subsequently committed suicide. That rather than Cassie like avenging herself, it's like this thing on behalf of somebody who is no longer there. But I don't know. Nonetheless, like I just feel like all of the costumes and the whole art design does work to convey something about a life that is like I don't want to say frozen in time, but is off the rails from what probably Cassie herself once envisioned or expected it to be.
I think that's the most significant thing about this movie. And in fact, like I also only just watched it last night, so I'm still processing it, but I'm thinking about how we don't see really anything that she does in revenge. Like we find out, there are a couple of times where you think that she has maybe set up another female character for to be the victim of violence. Then you find out that those were just setups. We see some sort of failed attempts or interrupted attempts at violence. Not attempts, but I mean, she decides that she's not going to have the hitman do whatever he's going to do. It's all very kind of hinted at. But the thing that I think is so pernicious about the type of violence that is the cause of this whole story is that balance between we wouldn't want to ruin these young men's lives. But then that question of like, well, how many women, left an industry because they couldn't put up with the sexual harassment anymore? How many women dropped out of medical school? How many girls, suffered from mental health or physical problems after the fact? So that and even the title of the movie, right? It's the potential that is robbed of these women. And I'm curious what you both thought about the fact that she's avenging her friend and she's also avenging kind of women and girls at large. Like, does that make her more empathetic or sympathetic? Because it's not just like, I have my own axe to grind.
I mean, for me, it does position it more, like, I think symbolically, and I think this film is very interested in symbolism. There's a lot of, like, religious kind of symbolism, the way Cassie is sort of poised as an avenging angel, but also as a forgiving angel in her interaction with the like Alfred Molina character, the lawyer, things like that. But it does help to me to make this about, I think, the collective grief and trauma of being a woman in this world, and knowing, whether it happens to us directly, whether it's people that we know, whether we just feel it, the danger of it looming over our lives in some fashion or another, that it is, Cassie is like, it isn't like about just like herself specifically, but rather about like these larger systems and the ways in which, so many promising young women are robbed of the potential that their lives might, that they're seen as holding, and all of that.
One of the things that I was tremendously gratified by is the way that the film explodes the notion of the perfect victim. And so the fact that, Cassie does not allow these men or their apologists, in the form of like Dean Walker, played by Connie Britton, or Madison, played by Allison Brie, to, to rest in, the lie that women who have been assaulted, who have been, taken advantage of, are somehow to blame because of the fact that they've had sex with before, the fact that they might enjoy sex, the fact that they've gotten drunk, the fact that they have been drunk around people that they've had sex before. Like, this film constantly wants both the audience and the characters within the film to sit with, the implications behind that. And so I loved how, there would be these moments of discomfort where Cassie would just stare back at someone and make them sort of, fidget. She wouldn't allow them off the hook. She does this with the construction workers who are harassing her. She does this with Dean Walker. She does with Ryan. But, the minute someone suggests like, well, or Madison, we all knew what it was like, right? Nina, she partied too much, or, we thought it was funny. We were kids, whatever. And she will just stare back at them and force them to really sit with that. I loved, the way that she would go out and she would, pretend to be drunk and allow these men to take her home, and then make them wriggle on the hook once they realized that she was sober, and just not afraid to let it be angry and tense and awkward. And she just owned the screen so often doing that.
Yeah, I feel like almost there's a way in which that gaze, that the angry, that gaze of Cassie's goes beyond the screen to the male viewer, who holds the same worldview, or or as the men that she pursues, right? Those men, like the men who engage in the negotiations with other men about women, like that conversation about like, oh, I didn't know the woman was taken, right? Like women are just these things to be, negotiated over between men, all of that. Like I feel like her gaze kind of cuts through all the bullshit around that.
And I mean, just the when you think about the men who are the most horrifying, in this cavalcade of assholes, it's the people like who is it, Adam Brody at the beginning, who seems initially as if he is genuinely caring, know, and as if he is genuinely different from his friends at the bar. It's people like Ryan who we think, like maybe this guy is, fundamentally different than his friends in college, and then reveals, that he is not. It's people like, Alfred Molina, who, yes, is very, is beating himself up with, the heaviest mea culpas, but ultimately allowed all of these things to happen under his watch. And in fact, promoted the destruction of women's lives. Characters like Max Greenfield as Joe, who helps Al Monroe burn Cassie's body at the end, or Sam Richardson's character, are almost cartoonish and in a way slightly easier to dismiss, because we know from the beginning that these are gross guys, but it's those nice ones who, pretend to be something other than they are not and reveal just the utter like moral bankruptcy.
Well, I think that's what's so, I mean, I was obsessed with the soundtrack, but from moment one where we have Charlie XCX Boys and you have all these khaki belted, like booties shaking. And then it was like, all of these guys are Veronica Mars's boyfriends. They're these like sweet, likable, generically blandly handsome men. It reminded me of Jennifer Fox's movie The Tale, which is about child sexual abuse, in which she casts Jason Ritter,
right?
Because she's like, he's so lovely and kind and sweet. So that's the face you don't expect to see as the villain. And what I thought was so great about Cassie she has a black and white view of things. But in the world, we have people who could be nice guys 80% of the time or 99% of the time and still have participated in these things. Yeah. The character of Al that she's seeking revenge on throughout the kind of third act, by all accounts, he might have a really lovely relationship with his fiance, and she may have always found him to be so respectful and wonderful, but just like Ryan, who seems like perfect, he also was complicit in this behavior when he was younger. And I think the thing that I'm also questioning about like the nuance of this world is that, Emerald Fennell and Carey Mulligan are English, but they made this an American story, maybe because of the sort of American college culture that's well known. But also, other than Sam Richardson, who's like shows up in 2 scenes as a guy at a bar, it's a completely whitewashed movie.
Yeah. And
where I want to kind of investigate my feelings about this movie more is like, obviously it had some inspiration from the Stanford case, in which Chanel Miller, when she came out with her own memoir, Know My Name, she talked about how there was a completely different reaction to her once she was revealed to be Asian American. Or,
right.
I May Destroy You, which I actually couldn't even finish watching, but which deals with a lot of the same sort of gray situations that a lot of young people find themselves in. And I wondered, this movie, I think, would have to be completely different if it had more characters in it that were not white.
Oh, yeah. That when Cassie is having that moment in her car and she's stopped traffic on the street and then gets out and knocks out the truck driver's taillights and his windshield. In that moment, I was immediately struck by how white this particular revenge fantasy was, and how the actions that Cassie engages in are not available for women of color. There's so much that she is able to do, even just, within the bounds of like her sort of outlaw vendetta, that are simply not available for women of color. And we do get, Sam Richardson, but I mean, there's also Laverne Cox as Gail, right? And this is a character that we've seen, many, many times before. The funny, like, emotionally reassuring but sassy Black friend. There's nothing wrong with this character on an individual basis. The problem is the accretion of them across media. But I thought, like, how different is this film if it's Laverne Cox playing Cassandra versus Carey Mulligan? It's an entirely different film. How different is it if the people that we are seeing are not, white men who are now doctors, but are in fact, working class men, men of color, et cetera. Like, it's an entirely different film, and it's not a film that we are accustomed to seeing, or stories that we're used to telling. Because even within, the kind of like genre explosion of this film, where it's playing with a lot of revenge thriller tropes, nevertheless, it has to give us something to hold on to, and it expects, I believe, a white viewer who will sort of understand the cultural context here and be like, oh yes, I get this.
Well, and I I admit, and I'm kind of getting towards the ending, I didn't know that she was going to die when I was watching the movie. Although when it happened, like, though I didn't anticipate it, it made perfect sense. I was like, yeah, I actually don't know how else this movie could have ended. But that whole last scene where there's like a lot of tension and buildup, and she's disingenuously going into a bachelor party in the guise of a stripper. And I was just like, okay, so, does this scene exist in the same universe as the Duke lacrosse case? Like, I think that there's a completely different, there's just a completely different lens on it. And, I didn't necessarily have that reaction that you alluded to, Ebony, where I was like, oh man, this messed me up that she died and now I need to talk about it. Because I just thought, even if she'd carved Nina's name into his chest and then left and never called Bo Burnham back, I was like, how does this movie end other than this? Like, she's not going to be satisfied.
Yeah, and I mean, so my lingering, the thing that sticks in my craw a bit about the ending the most is not the decision to have Cassie die, and really I thought the scene in which she dies is appropriately like horrific. I mean, the film lingers on the act of her being murdered, unflinchingly, and it's truly like horrifying. But there is this, like, are we supposed to, in the concluding scene, be sort of satisfied by the arrival of the police and the idea that, like, the justice, quote unquote, the justice system, such as it is, the system of cops and trials and prisons or what have you, is going, like, do we think that Al is actually going to, like, be convicted, like, of this? Like, do we think that I was thinking, this is another, like, yeah, if we make the Brock Turner parallel in our minds, I mean, then, maybe out for her death, okay, but, like, the larger question of, like, I don't know, I just see so many ways in which a person of his privilege, of his position, right, with his wealth, with his whiteness, with his status, all of this, with his friends, his connections, will be, like, will be free. And I don't think, if Cassie were not white, like, I don't think there'd even really be the illusion, even the temporary illusion or satisfaction of justice via, cop arrival or what have you, So, yeah, I don't know. I'm still, like, mulling over that aspect of the film and what it is we're really supposed to feel in that ending, because it seems with the dramatic, the text message from beyond the grave, like, that it wants to deliver to us some kind of, like, yes, she got it, fuck you, feeling. But I don't know. I just don't see it. I just don't see the systems actually supporting that outcome.
Well, I also think, like, there's an odd kind of like these tonal eruptions in this film. So it is, it's a black comedy, it's a revenge thriller, and it swings, I don't want to say wildly back, but it's, extreme from the two extremes, often in the film. And many times it works, but sometimes, I found myself pulled out. And so when that scene at the wedding reception where the cops descend en masse and, they arrest Al, could be taken one way, but then we have the figure of Joe running away in this almost like slapstick kind of way. It might as well be the Benny Hill music. And I was like, this was a moment for me where I thought, like, this deserves more than the kind of comedy that you're inserting right here, or it deserves a better performance. It deserves better direction. Like, that could have been excised. And I think, the film it could have been better in the same way that, as much as I love Sam Richardson, his, kind of cartoony version of fedora wearing guy, also pulled me out of the film, because this kind of like, Reddit drawing of a gross dude, like, we're all equipped to identify that person, and as a evildoer, as someone who's, willing to do bad things. But again, it's those people like, Adam Brody or, Ryan Cooper, who really sort of allow us to sit with like the horror of this film. And so sometimes I felt like, and particularly at that, that scene at the end, the tone shift didn't work for me. And so it interrupted, my understanding of the ending and what I was meant to take from it. Because you get that text string, which came in like with such amazing timing, right? Like, dot, dot, dot. I told you this wouldn't be the end. Dot, dot, dot. Love, Cassie, or whatever. And I was just like, this is really amazing. I didn't know you could schedule text like this, but I got to start doing it to fuck with people.
Well, it's her whole MO is about giving people the opportunity to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a good tension in that because, like, you can give people the opportunity all day, but what's the more natural human reaction? So, yeah, like the ending and, the guy's, so scared on his wedding day he's going to get arrested. That wasn't that interesting to me. I was more interested when the police showed up at Ryan's doctor's office. Mm-hmm. And, I thought there was a big part of me that, despite having heard the audio of the video and knowing that he was complicit in what happened when he was in college, I still felt for him. And I thought, he's going to say here that this woman that he has fallen in love with is missing. And he knows that she could very well be in danger. Like, I thought, he's going to be the one to turn them in or something. Like, there's going to be some opportunity there. Or she sends the phone to Alfred Molina's character because he's shown remorse and he now has the opportunity to do the right thing. Who knows if he will? The statute of limitations has passed on the assault anyway. So, he may just do nothing with that. But that's like, I don't know. I'm even wondering, like, what she actually does to the men that she takes home, because when she meets Sam Richardson a second time, he references Adam Brody's character, so I don't think she's killed him. But if she is acting violent towards Adam Brody's character, he very well, like, I'm not sure how to phrase this, but the horrific, violent way in which she dies at the end of the movie is something that could have happened so many times.
Right.
So that there was something about how realistic that was and I've talked about this with many women about, like, the risk you take when you go home with a stranger, and that comes up in I May Destroy You, and how, even if somebody has not given you any indication that they might become violent, you never know whether or not they will. So the fact that she can easily be overpowered by a man that she's handcuffed to the bed, I just kind of had a few more questions than answers about, like, so what is she doing with Adam Brody? Is she just giving him a lecture? I don't think so. But.
Well, I mean, when we see her, walking home past the construction workers, she has blood on her, right? Am I misremembering?
I thought that was a little misdirect because then she's eating a jelly donut.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I thought it was like, you thought it was blood, but actually it's just her jelly donut.
See, you're a better viewer than me, I am.
My little headcanon in the middle of the film, because she has her book, like her little journal, and like some of the lines are red and some of the lines are black. And so I sort of said, okay, maybe the red ones are men that she killed, and then the black ones are men that she just like let live or whatever. Or red is like men she physically she drew blood from in some fashion. But I'm not sure that ultimately the narrative of the film supports that interpretation. But I don't know. It's deliberately ambiguous, right? I mean, in ways that a lot of, like, this film, it has like the sheen of pulp cinema, but it's I do feel like there's a bit of like an intellectual distance in this film. Like, it's not. It doesn't have like a pulp film would give us the satisfaction of, the Cassie figure, like, just drawing blood from a man, like straight up killing him or somehow exacting the physical vengeance upon him. And this film doesn't do that. And I don't know, like I will say for overall, this film, ultimately, I admire it a great deal. I think it's fascinating. It's very provocative. It gave me a lot to think about. I love the way that it does catalog so much, so accurately about, how men dehumanize women, how even, nice, quote unquote, nice men, so often are actually like fundamentally terrible. But I did feel like the emotional distance or the intellectual distance I felt this film kept from its subject matter did prevent it from like really being the kind of cathartic film that I guess I wanted it to be on some level.
Right.
Yeah, I think it will, like, I want it to have the kind of clout that it would have if David Fincher made it. I mean, it's got a lot of similarities to Gone Girl.
That's a very good comparison.
Yeah. And it's, I don't think, like at the afterwards, I didn't necessarily think that I had to sit with anything more than I have to sit with by virtue of just having lived a life as a woman, like they didn't make me think anything new really, but I thought it was pulpy and fun and an elevated B movie kind of like, I don't think it needs to be art to still be significant. And I hope that people watch it who maybe won't have asked themselves these questions, right? Like the Ryans in the world who will watch it and this might be the first time that they're thinking, but I am, but nice. Wait, I thought And
I have to say, I do think Bo Burnham deserves so much credit for making Ryan, we have to love Ryan. Like we have to and we have to want so much for him to be the person who can be, sympathetic to Cassie's trauma, to be patient with her, to be, to be that person who can, who can love and be loved by her. And I mean, and he's so, I just think the casting, he's so good in the role because he really did make me want that for those characters and for Cassie in particular so much. And, it made it genuinely painful. And, when it turned out that, of course, even though I saw, I'm like, he's going to be shitty. He's going to be shitty. It still made it painful when he turned out to be shitty.
And kudos again to the soundtrack because Emerald Fennell said, "You couldn't help but love a man who knows all the words to Stars Are Blind." And she's completely right. At that scene, I was like, oh, I'm so charmed. I'm so charmed by this person.
And yet it was weird too, right? Like, them singing along to Paris Hilton, a woman who also famously, was the victim of like sexualized violence. Like, she had that sex tape that was released, outside of her consent. And I was just like, okay, like there are moments when there's a lot of shit going on being layered into these scenes. And I did absolutely appreciate that. And I do think like there are moments at the beginning, after our introduction to Ryan, where we do get a sense that maybe he isn't someone who really listens to women, right? Because in that first scene with them, he comes in, there's the whole thing where she spits in his coffee, he drinks it. I almost shut the movie down right there. But then, he comes back and there are moments where I was like, dude, she said no. And yet you kept coming and trying. And we have been conditioned to think this is charming, this relentless pursuit, and it's not. It's not. And it can be dressed up in so many ways, but ultimately, this woman has indicated that she's not interested in you, and you're continuing to pursue her. There's something fucked up about that. Yeah, parts of this movie, absolutely so great. So good.
But if it was Christopher Mintz-Plasse showing up to the coffee shop day after day, it would be a different story.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
On that note, we will be right back to share our weekly freakouts. Hey friends, thanks for listening to FFR. If you enjoy our weekly conversations about the intersection of feminism and pop culture, consider hopping over to patreon.com/femfreak and joining our podcast community. You can get access to exclusive bonus episodes, join our friendly Discord server, participate in polls to help decide topics for future episodes, and more. Plus, you'll be helping us keep bringing FFR to the virtual podcast airwaves. Visit patreon.com/femfreak today. What's your freak out? Now it's time to talk about what's been thrilling us, moving us, upsetting us, or infuriating us this past week. And this week, we are putting our guest in the Freq Out spotlight. Kat, what do you have to share with our 3 listeners?
My Freq Out is both the name of a TV show and a command. It is Call Me Kat. The new Fox sitcom that I never would have imagined would be my Freq Out, but it is my Freq Out on so many levels. First of all, it's creepy. Somebody has been watching me and recording elements of my life and turning it into a sitcom. This doesn't make sense for a number of reasons, primarily because it is based on the Miranda Hart BBC sitcom Miranda, but also because of, a number of things, like she runs a cat cafe and I'm deathly allergic to cats. Regardless, Mayim Bialik is a celebrity I've been told I resemble. She plays a character named Kat who has lost her father, which is an experience I have gone through. Her mother, Swoozie Kurtz, is very insistent that she get married now that she's 39. My mom is nothing like Swoozie Kurtz and also everything like Swoozie Kurtz. And the show includes a cast of characters. It's like a laugh track sitcom with Leslie Jordan, who steals every scene he's in. Of course, he's Leslie Jordan. Cheyenne Jackson doing his darndest, but not legally straight, if you ask me. And Kyla Pratt as the Laverne Cox character of this show, as well as I don't know the actor who works with Cheyenne Jackson. But I watched the first episode thinking I couldn't wait to hate watch this, just like I watched Bob Hart's Ebishola, just so that I could talk to you about it. And then 5 minutes in, I was like, what the hell? Half of the details about this character are ripped from the headlines of my life, and it's damn charming. She's someone who makes, she says, I don't understand why anybody would criticize what other people wear. Are you comfortable? Great. She's a kind of laissez-faire. She enjoys her life. I found myself completely charmed by it, and I'm now watching it every week. So,
God.
Yeah, it's my Freq Out because I'm literally freaking out. I don't know how to process it.
I don't know how to process it either. And this is not the first time that I'm hearing about it, but the fact that it has now been, put down in the book of life, it's now an official Freq Out. I wasn't ready. I really wasn't ready. But you know what? I'm gonna let you cook with this, and for you to start writing fanfic about Mayim Bialik and Cheyenne Jackson or whatever is gonna turn out to be the ship.
It's all gonna be about Leslie Jordan, who's a recently divorced character, and I really need a lot more backstory on that.
So good.
Well, there you have it. Remember, dear listeners, that you can submit your own Freq Out at feministfrequency.com/freakout. That's FREQOUT. Well, thanks so much for listening to Feminist Frequency Radio. Join us next week as we launch a special month of programming looking at provocative Black films. We'll be starting with Pariah, the 2011 feature by director Dee Rees, which is available to watch on many streaming services. You can find our guest online on Twitter at @Kat_X_Machina. Is that correct?
Yes.
@XMachina. And her podcast updates at 90210 Blaze. Our show is engineered by Rob Para. Carrie Stimson provides technical support. Artwork is by Jamie Varon, and our intro music is by Phil Circus. Thanks for listening, everyone. See you next time.
Bye.
Thank you.